Good morning, everyone. Please be seated. On behalf of all of us at Mayo College, I welcome all of you to this 2.5-day event. I know it has been a challenge for some of you to travel here due to circumstances beyond anybody's control. But I'm happy to see that despite that, you've had the persistence to make it. I just want to highlight that this is a unique event. Most of you would have attended Model United Nations. The other extreme of the United Nations is an organization called the G7, which is basically a rich man's club. But for the voices of the south of the world, there is this formulation called the G20, which has been around for some time, but never really made a mark before. Last year, or I would say 2022, Indonesia had the presidency, and at the end of it, because the system is based on consensus, they could not come to an agreement on some core issues. Last year in September, when the summit was held in Delhi, after a year long of organizing more than 200 meetings in 60 different cities, not only G20 became known all over India, it also became known all over the world because India successfully negotiated what then came out to be the Delhi Declaration. Therefore, unlike in a Model United Nations, when you are working on problems that need to be solved tomorrow or day after, the G20 summit is an event where things have happened. But because we had a successful Delhi Declaration and India's leadership made such a big mark, there are going to be downstream effects of India's leadership. And the person who steered this to a successful conclusion was India's Sherpa for the G20, who negotiated all the tough parts with various countries and virtually, as always happens, at the last minute was able to drive a consensus which allowed the Delhi Declaration to be written. We are extremely fortunate that for this one-off event that has happened in any of the schools in India, India's G20 Sherpa, Mr. Amitabh Kant, is right here amongst us. He was very kind to accept my invitation. I know he has a crazy schedule. In fact, yesterday he was in Bangalore, and well, short of going to Bangalore to bring him, because he had to come, I sent none less than the Chief Security Officer of our General Counsel, Colonel Rahul Rathod, to personally go to Jaipur and bring him, so that there is no slip between cup and lip. But he's here amongst us, so we are very honored. Personally, I'm delighted, because I'm a great fan of the way you speak, of the incredible work you've done as a bureaucrat. I've served 40 years in the government, and I know if from within the system you can get something done, you really have to push the envelope hard. For those of you who are not familiar, I'm sure it will be read out in his bio, but he was the author of the famous God's Own Country campaign when he was an IAS officer in Kerala. He then came to Delhi and was the CMD of the ITDC when he came up with the Incredible India campaign, which was the next big huge success. After that, when he was about to retire, the government needed his services, so they made him head of the new Niti Aayog, erstwhile known as the Planning Commission, where he replaced Mr. Panagaraya, I hope I get the name right, the American guy, Arvind Panagaraya. And when he finished that, the government found it fit to make him the Sherpa. And the Sherpa, India Sherpa, is to deal with the other 19 entities and work with them to come to kind of consensus on every possible issue. Traditionally, you would imagine this would be the closed domain of the Foreign Service. But it is to the credit of our leadership in our country and to the acumen of Mr. Kant that as an IAS officer, he was chosen to be the Sherpa to lead or guide India's path. So for your fabulous achievements, sir, but more importantly, for your communication skills, I only know one other guy in India who is a better communicator, and I don't have to take his name. May I extend a very, very warm welcome, not only on behalf of Mayo, but all these lovely young children who've come from many, many schools, including his alma mater, modern school is also here today. So thank you very much, sir. Allow one of our boys to do your formal introduction. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to the Mayo Model G20 Summit. This G20 simulation is not merely a competition, but a unique platform for us to explore the complexities of international relations, economic policies, and socio-political dynamics. The idea is to engage in constructive debates, negotiate policies, and contribute to crafting solutions that address the pressing issues faced by the world. This morning, we have gathered here for a keynote speech, and it is my proud privilege to introduce the keynote speaker of the day, Mr. Amitabh Kant. Mr. Amitabh Kant is a governance reformer and a public policy change agent. He is presently the G20 Sherpa to the Prime Minister of India. As India's Sherpa during the G20 presidency in 2022-23, he navigated the challenging geopolitical waters, steering the G20 towards a consensus on a decisive and action-oriented New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, an essential document that outlined a clear path for addressing pressing global issues. Beyond his G20 role, Mr. Kant's illustrious career spans key senior positions in the government of India, where he spearheaded initiatives that reshaped the nation's economic landscape. His journey in public service includes serving as the CEO of Niti Aayog with Prime Minister of India as its chairman. His tenure also saw him at the helm of the Department for Industrial Policy and Promotion, DIPP in India, as CEO of the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor Development Corporation, DMI-CDC, and as Secretary, Tourism Government of Kerala. In these capacities, he demonstrated an unwavering commitment to pursuing reforms, driving economic growth and innovation in India. Mr. Amitabh Kant is a true thought leader and has been a driving force behind numerous reforms and initiatives that have revolutionized India's landscape. Initiatives like Startup India, Make in India, Incredible India, Ease of Doing Business Reforms, Aspirational Districts Program, and Production Linked Incentive, PLI, have left an indelible mark on the nation. His books, including Made in India, Incredible India 2.0, and Branding India, An Incredible Story, have helped shape India's narrative. He has also edited The Path Ahead, Transformative Ideas for India. Beyond India's borders, Mr. Kant has been a member of the steering board of Shaping the Future of Production Systems initiative at the World Economic Forum, WEF. He's also a champion of the Edison Alliance of the WEF, which focuses on deepening digital inclusion in areas such as health, education, and finance for developing nations worldwide. His contributions extended to the management board of the International Transport Forum, a unique intergovernmental agency for global transport. He received the prestigious Sir Edmund Hillary Fellowship, conferred by the Prime Minister of New Zealand, is a Chevening Scholar and recipient of One Globe Award for leadership in transforming governance for the 21st century. In the dynamic and ever-changing realm of global governance, Mr. Amitabh Kant stands as an unwavering beacon of leadership, innovation, transformative change, not only for India, but for the world. His journey is a testament to the power of visionary leadership and public policy in shaping the future of nations and the global community. We welcome you, sir. May I now request Drishan to present a sapling to Mr. Kant. Thank you, Trishan. Without further ado, may I now invite Mr. Amitabh Kant to address the gathering.
General Kulkarni, Mrs. Kulkarni, the Vice Principal, the Proctor, the Bursar, all the distinguished teachers, the students of Mayo College, and the teachers and students who've come from other schools. It's such a pleasure to be in Mayo College. And I'm truly delighted and honored to be in the midst of such young, vibrant students. Today morning I took a walk around Mayo College, and I was truly fascinated to see this wonderful infrastructure that is here. When I was growing up, I was studying in Delhi, in modern school Delhi, and I see some students from modern school here. And my elder brother had actually studied in Mayo College, and we used to constantly have animated arguments amongst ourselves that which school is better of the two. And he always used to say that modern school is not a patch on Mayo College because of this wonderful infrastructure that Mayo College has. And one of my great dreams was to come to Mayo College and see for myself. And I'm truly delighted to be here, and I must say that students who are studying in Mayo College, or Mayo girls, are truly fortunate and lucky to be here. They're very fortunate that their parents have put them here, that they're going through this wonderful education. They're being taught by such outstanding teachers, guided by General Kulkarni here. And it's one of the finest schools and one of the finest infrastructures you can see anywhere in the world. So all of you are really fortunate to be here. General Kulkarni is, literally directed me to speak on my experiences of G20 and how India was able to bring across consensus on a vast range of global issues during its G20. So first of all, let me tell you that G20 is important. It comprises of 19 countries plus the European Union. And G20 is important because it comprises of countries and European Union which account for about 85% of the global GDP. They account for about 80% of the global trade. They account for about 2/3 of the global population. So in terms of the global GDP, in terms of the global trade, in terms of the global population, G20 is very important. It is also important because the United Nations, which comprises of 186 countries, has become a very unwieldy body and is not able to arrive at a consensus. And it is important that in multilateral forums, you are able to arrive at a consensus. If anything is steered forward, if any decision has to be implemented, consensus is critical. And therefore, arriving at a consensus is extremely important. So, when India took over the presidency of G20, there were various challenges in the world. The first and foremost challenge in the world, and it's very important for all of you to understand this, and it's important that what are the challenges which are confronting the world? First and foremost, there is a slowdown of global growth. It will be very difficult to lift people above the poverty line, citizens of the world above the poverty line. When leaders meet, for them to do things for their citizens is very important. And therefore, if the world economy doesn't grow, it will be very difficult to lift people above poverty line. Now when India took over the presidency, the global growth had slowed down. 1/3 of the world is facing a recession. Even a country like Germany is in recession. So there was a slowdown of growth. Secondly, it's important, and this, all of you must understand this because we are caught up in the world of India. It's important to understand what is happening around the world. One is there is a slowing down of global growth. Secondly, sustainable development growth. How many of you have heard about sustainable development goals? So all of you have heard about sustainable development goals. And sustainable development goals were to be implemented by 2030. The target is 2030, SDG 2030. And how many SDG goals are there? Are you aware of it? How many SDG goals are there? You? Huh? Okay. Now out of them, only 12% are on track. The world, because of COVID, instead of progressing, the world has regressed. We have not been able to make improvement in learning outcomes, in health outcomes, in nutrition because of COVID. So the world has gone backward instead of progressing in SDGs. And third was the very big challenge of climate action and climate finance. So by 2050, the world has to reach a certain level of centigrade. And what is that level of centigrade? Yeah, what is that level of centigrade? 1.5 degrees centigrade. Okay? So if we do not reach 1.5 degrees centigrade, the earth may survive, but we as human beings will go extinct. And therefore the challenge for all of us in the world, the developed countries, the developing countries, everyone is that we are able to reach 1.5 degrees centigrade by 2050. By 2050, that is the challenge. And because the world is seeing great amount of earth warming, climatic conditions are changing, and therefore, according to great scientific studies, several leading studies, the world must reach 1.5 degrees centigrade. That is the challenge before all of us. And the fourth is that to be able to achieve sustainable development goals and to achieve climate action, you need a lot of financial resources. Now, these financial resources are particularly required for developing countries. Developing countries like India, because we are the most populous country in the world. Now, if we have to lift vast segments of population, if we have to achieve climatic conditions, we have to use technology to leapfrog. Now, to get technology and to be able to implement, if you are moving away from coal to other forms of energy, you need financial resources. Now, financial resources will flow in from multilateral financial institutions. You require the World Bank, you require many other institutions, but most of these institutions were made post-World War II. They were made in what is known as the post-Bretton Woods period. And in the post-World War II, there was no challenge of sustainable development goals there was no challenge of climate action. And therefore, these institutions now need to be revised, they need to be redesigned, they need to be restructured so that they are able to provide finance to the developing countries. They are able to ensure that greater flow of resources flow in to developing countries. They are able to raise resources from private sector to allow money to flow in. And therefore, you need a redesign of the multilateral financial institutions. That was a challenge. The fifth is that technology has changed. There was a huge importance of what India wanted to do was how do you use technological transformation and digital public infrastructure to leapfrog. That became our fifth priority. And digital public infrastructure I'll dwell upon in the coming minutes. And then the priority for us was, one of the key priorities for us was women-led development. India's priority was women-led development because the Prime Minister, who was the leader, felt that 50% of the population comprises of women in the world, and without putting women into position of leadership, without improving their health outcomes, their educational outcomes, improving their nutrition, it will be very difficult for the world to grow and prosper. So that became our priority. So these were our key priorities before us. So I'll repeat these priorities for your sake. The first priority was push for strong, sustainable, inclusive and balanced growth. Second was accelerate the pace of sustainable development goals. The third was what we termed as the Green Development Pact amongst leaders for climate action, climate finance and many other things which I'll talk about. The fourth was reform of the multilateral development banks. The fifth was technological transformation and digital public infrastructure. And the sixth was women-led development. These became our priorities. So I've given you 6 priorities that we had to drive. And these became, for us, the challenge was that in 1 year's time, we had to bring consensus on all these issues. The Prime Minister also made 2 priorities very clear to us. One was that India's presidency must be very inclusive. It must be very decisive and it must be action-oriented. So it must be inclusive, it must be decisive, it must be action-oriented. And second thing he said was that India's presidency must speak the voice of the global South. Must speak the voice of the global South. And therefore, becoming the voice of the global South. What does global South mean? Global South is a term used for emerging markets and for the less developed countries. And therefore, many of the African countries, Latin American countries, the developing countries, the emerging markets, they all form a part of the global South. And therefore, global South was very, very important. And therefore, India became the voice of the global South. So before we started our G20 meeting, the Prime Minister held a virtual meeting with all the Prime Ministers of the Global South, and heard them out, and there they all said that their development was very important. And 75 of these countries are facing a global debt crisis, and therefore finding a solution to that challenge was also very important for us. So one of the key things that we pushed for during this was the priorities of the Global South, and one of the key things which the Global South said was that African Union must become a permanent member of G20. African Union becomes a member of G20, which we argued and fought for during the G20 and ensured that African Union becomes a member of G20. The challenge for India was to be able to bring consensus in multilateral forums. Consensus is important. If consensus is not arrived at, then there is no agreement. And therefore, the last 4 to 5 years have seen multilateralism taking a retreat. The United Nations is a multilateral forum, but in the United Nations, they are not able to arrive at agreements. G20, if it fails in arriving at a consensus, means that multilateralism will take a hit and the world will not be able to work together. What is important is to work together, and whether the challenge for India, what was the challenge for India? The challenge for India during its G20 presidency was to work with G7, that is the developed countries of the world, to work with developing countries of the world. The G20 comprises of G7, it comprises of developing countries, it comprises of Russia, it comprises of China, to bring them all together and arrive at a consensus on all these key issues that I spoke about. And if you are not able to arrive at a consensus, then multilateralism fails, G20 fails, India fails, the G20 in India fails. That was the challenge. And United Nations throughout the period has failed because of one issue. What was that issue? What? Huh? No. What is that issue? Yeah, you're busy talking. What is the challenge? Tell me. Tell me what is the challenge. Both of you are busy talking amongst yourselves. Tell me what is the challenge. So listen very carefully. The challenge before the world when India took up this crisis was the Russia-Ukraine war. Because of Russia-Ukraine war, there are different perspectives. United Nations is not able to arrive at an agreement because in United Nations Security Council, and when Security Council was formed, it was never envisaged that one of the 5 members of the Security Council will go to a war. And therefore the United Nations Security Council has not been able to arrive at an agreement. The challenge for India was that despite the Russia-Ukraine crisis, we should be able to bring an agreement on all these development issues and also bring an agreement on the Russia-Ukraine crisis. And therefore, we had to bring Russia, China, developed countries all together on one issue and also bring an agreement on the Russia-Ukraine paragraph. That was the important challenge. The challenge was the Russia-Ukraine war. When India took over the presidency, the Russia-Ukraine war was already on for 1 year. It took us 300 on one paragraph of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. It took us 300 all through the year we negotiated. We failed. Every single ministerial failed. We had 13 ministerials, all of them failed. All through the year. In Bali we had failed. All through the year we failed. Finally, we did the Sherpa meeting just before the leaders' conference, where on one paragraph we negotiated for 300 hours. 300 hours on one para. We did 250 rounds of bilaterals with different countries. We did 16 rounds of drafts where we failed, and 17th round we finally negotiated and we got it one day before the leaders had come in just one day before we finally managed, and we had many other issues later. I'll come to that, but we managed to get a consensus on all issues and on the Russia-Ukraine issue. So India achieved consensus on, we had 83 paras, and I would, since many of you will debate and discuss this, please read the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. It will give you an experience of how declarations are drafted, how India did its drafting, because the challenge is to create a world-class document. It will give you an experience of how good drafting is done on international issues. So, what did we do? We created 83 paras on which we built consensus. And on these 83 paras had 87 outcomes. And they also had 126 documents attached to them. On all of them there was consensus. All of them. Every single letter is fought for. Every single word is fought for. We achieved consensus on about 212 issues, whereas, earlier in previous G20s, if you look at Indonesia, there was 55, in Rome there was 48, in Saudi there was 60, but we crossed it on all key issues. We had achieved consensus. Now, that is what did India do? We brought multilateralism back center stage. India achieved something where the United Nations had failed. We brought multilateralism back, we brought the story of growth and development back, we brought sustainable development goals back, we brought women-led development back, we brought technological development back center stage, we brought the story of development back center stage. And that was what was important. Now, let me take you through some of these issues to give you a perspective of what we did. First of all, it's important to understand that global growth and global economy is important. And if you want to achieve global growth, then trade is very important. Because without trade, you are not able to lift people. In the last 2 decades, a lot of people have got lifted. If you look at China, they've lifted 500 million people. The new multi-dimensional survey for India has come out by Niti Aayog, which shows that India has lifted very huge number of population above the poverty line in recent times, because we focused on development, but in all this, trade has played a very major role. And therefore, growth and trade were important. We in India, when we were saying that sustainable development goals are important, because when world leaders meet, for them, their citizens are important, for them, lifting them above poverty line, education, health, nutrition, all this is very important. So accelerating sustainable development goals was very important. So we built a new SDG action plan, a 7-year action plan, which was very important, which has been accepted by the United Nations, and therefore the sustainable development goals was driven by India. And thirdly, for all of you, this Green Development Pact, which India did, has several components. But climate action and climate finance is very critical. Now, what it says is, what we must understand about climate action is that at 1.5 degree is what we have to reach by 2050. Now, at 1.5 degree, the total carbon space available for the world is 2,800 gigatons. Out of this 2,400 gigatons has already been occupied by the developed countries. So what, when United States was growing, when Europe was growing, when they were developing, what did they do? They used fossil fuel. They used petrol, they used gas, they used coal, they did everything. And their model of development was fossil fuel consuming. So they have already occupied all the carbon space. All the carbon space has been occupied. Only 400 gigatons is left for developing countries. Only 400 gigatons is left for developing countries. And all this, I am repeating this again and again because this you must understand. The challenge for all of us in developing. We are all from developing country like India. Out of 2,800 gigatons, 2,400 gigatons has been occupied by developed countries, 400 gigatons is left. Now, they say that we must achieve 1.5 degrees centigrade. Now, you have occupied all the carbon space. So, in Paris, in what is known as COP, how many of you heard of COP 21, COP 26? How many of you have heard of COP? So all this is very important. I'm repeating this again and again because these are important issues for you to understand. That is how the world is growing. Now COP is the annual summit on climate change. Is the annual summit. So the COP 21 in Paris said that there will be common, hear this word, the word used was common, but common, and the common was 1.5 degrees centigrade in 2050. The target is 2050, but differentiated responsibility. Because the carbon space has all been occupied by the developed countries, there will be different responsibilities. We will all work for 1.5 degrees centigrade, but they said that we will assist developing countries through finance and technology. What was the commitment in finance? That they will pay $100 billion a year to developing countries. $100 billion a year. Now the developed countries did not do that. None of them did that. But many of them have announced their net zero target for 2050. Many of them have announced their net zero target for 2050. China has said that they will achieve it in 2060. India has said that they will achieve it in 2070. 2070. But for all this to happen, it is important that the developed world has not lived up to its commitment. But for all this to happen, it is important that a country like India works for climate change. We have occupied very little carbon space. We have occupied only 1.5% of the carbon space. On a per capita population basis, India is entitled to 17.5% carbon space. But as India is now industrializing, it is urbanizing now, you will see 500 million people getting into urbanization. You will see India industrializing. We will emit a lot of greenhouse gas. That is why the air quality is very bad in Delhi, Mumbai, etc. So, we will become in future a very big polluter, and therefore India also has to take action. Now, if we do not do this, we will, in future, the world will go green. Europe, America will all demand green products. If we do not make technological transformation, we will lose an opportunity. And therefore, India must become the first country in the world to industrialize and urbanize without carbonizing. India must become the first country in the world to industrialize and urbanize without carbonizing. And for this, it is very important that we go into renewable, because India is climatically blessed. India has the climate condition to do renewable energy, which no other country in the world other than South Africa. The only other country which can match climatic condition of India is Saudi Arabia. And you can do a lot of renewable at the lowest cost in the world, So India should produce renewable energy. Renewable energy can replace electricity, but there are a number of other, when you produce cement, when you produce steel, when you produce what you use in refinery, what you use in fertilizer, is not renewable energy. Renewable energy is 20% of our energy. Rest is fossil fuel. Fossil fuel means we import gas. We import 200 billion worth of gas. And we use that gas for what? We use it for transportation, we use it for steel, we use it for cement, we use it for many other purposes. India's plan is that we will use renewable, we will crack water and produce green hydrogen, and by 2047 we will replace fossil fuel with green hydrogen. And we will, in steel, in cement, in long distance transport, in fertilizer and refinery, instead of imported fossil fuel, we will replace it with green hydrogen. That is our plan. And India can be a champion of green hydrogen. Those of you who are studying chemistry, those of you who are studying physics will understand that India can be the cheapest producer of green hydrogen. India can be the biggest exporter of green hydrogen. India can produce green hydrogen at very low cost. And therefore, India's plan is to first do renewable, replace 20% of your energy, which is electricity, with renewable, balance 80% is fossil fuel, replace it with green hydrogen, become the lowest producer, become an exporter of energy. Today we import energy. We are importing $200 billion worth of energy to replace it and export energy. That is the challenge for India in the coming years. So when many of you will grow up and you get into policy making, many of you will get into private sector, many of you will get into manufacturing, some of you will get into research, many of you will get into development areas. The challenge for you will be to replace fossil fuel by green hydrogen. Therefore, India has to become a champion of green hydrogen, and India is climatically blessed to do that. So, what India pushed for was a Green Development Pact, and the Green Development Pact said that the world will move towards green, we will move towards 1.5 degrees centigrade. There is a need for finance which the developed world will provide, and we said that there has to be a reform of the multilateral development banks. And the multilateral development banks must be restructured, redesigned to support this transition of developing countries towards clean countries. And multilateral development banks must move away from what they were. They do direct lending. They should be able to raise private capital from the private sector and finance this transition. Why is this necessary? This is necessary because we must understand that there is no shortage of funds in the world. There is almost $300 trillion available with the private sector. But private sector money does not come to developing countries. Private sector $300 trillion is available. But $300 trillion goes to only developed world. It does not come to developing countries. So money is available. But money you get at 2% interest in US and Europe, 8% in India, 16% in Africa, 22% in sub-Saharan countries. That is the difference which makes the project commercially non-viable. So we said the multilateral development banks, the World Bank, etc. must ensure that India and other countries get money at the same rate of interest. That means de-risk the projects, redesign them, and that became our key priority. And therefore, Green Development Pact reform of multilateral financial institutions became our key priority. And the fourth key priority, and in this Green Development Pact, when you read it in the declaration, has many components. It has component of biofuel, it has component of circular economy, it has component of green hydrogen, many components. It has a component of behavioral change. Behavioral change we were pushing for. The Prime Minister pushed for lifestyle for environment, lifestyle for sustainability. Because when you go to New York, you'll find all buildings will have their lights on. When you go to New York, you'll see water taps flowing. In several countries, water taps are flowing. So if you are able to change your lifestyle, you will be able to save 21% greenhouse gas emission in the world. And therefore, life became our priority. The fourth key priority was technological transformation and digital public infrastructure. And this is important because digital public infrastructure, how many of you have heard of digital public infrastructure? Okay, so let me understand this, because I think in the future it will help you. So if you look at the last 2 decades, all technological innovation have come from what is known as the big tech. And what is the big tech? The big tech are companies like Google, they are Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, which is now known as Meta. These are the companies which have driven all technological innovation in the last 2 decades. All technological innovation, they control cloud, they control social media, they control operating systems, they control all digital advertising, everything they control. That is in the western part of the world. In China, who controls the same thing? There are 2 companies, Tencent and Alibaba. Tencent and Alibaba, they control all this. All technological innovation in the world has come from in the western part of the world, from what is known as big tech. I named you the company. In China, it has come from Tencent and Alibaba. In India, we did something very different. And technological innovation normally does not come from developing countries, but in this case, the biggest technological innovation came from India. What did it come from? It came from a fundamental thing, that is, we created a digital identity for all Indians. All of you have a digital identity? All of you have an Aadhaar? Okay. So we created what is known as a public interest layer. Public interest layer called Aadhaar. Then between 2015 and 2017, India opened 550 million bank accounts. How many bank accounts did it open? 550 million bank accounts. That is twice the population of United States of America. Understand the size and scale of what we did. 55% of the bank accounts opened in the world in 3 years were opened in India. Every second bank account was opened in India. Then what did we do? We linked up the bank account with your Aadhaar. And what did we do? We linked it up with your mobile number. Now, while you may not be using it in your school, all of you have used a mobile phone. Okay. So your mobile number and your Aadhaar was linked to your bank account, and because of that, we were able to do what is known as fast payments. How many of you have done payment from your mobile? Okay. Oh, very high number. Very high number. So what has happened is that India has moved away from checkbooks. India has moved away from physical banks. India has moved away from ATM machines to this has become our bank. Mobile is your bank. You do your debit, you do your credit from your mobile. So you have a bank in your mobile. You do. So what does India do? India does 46% 46% of the real-time fast payments in the world. How many percent? 46% of the fast payment. We are number one in the world. How many transactions do we do? You know that? 120 billion payments we did in 2023. And China is number two. How many transactions it did? It did 25 billion. So we did 120, China is number two, it did 25 billion, United States is third, it did about 10 billion. America still uses paperwork for all transactions. We have technologically leapfrogged. So in the last 4.5 years, I have not been to a bank, I have not been to an ATM machine, I have used only my mobile for all my transactions. So this is what India has done. We have been able to create digital identity. We have been able to create bank accounts. When we started bank accounts, in India only 18% of the women had bank accounts. Today, how many percentage of women have bank accounts? 91% of women have bank accounts. So, from 18% to 91% we were able to do. We are number one in data consumption. We are number one in fintech adoption. We are number one in app downloads in the world. And India has created a huge data set, which I'll tell you. So what did India do? India started doing fast payments. Then what did India do next? What? Yeah, good. So what did India do with the payments? It created a number of young startups. How many of you have heard of startups like Mobicway, Lending, Pine Lab, Lending Cart? You've heard of them? So they provide you cashless, paperless credit. They give you paperless credit. They look at your payment history and on the basis of that they give you credit. When you go to a bank, they will say, give me this paper, that paper, this paper. They don't look at any paper. They will look at your transactional history of the past. They will say what payments you've made, and on the basis of that, they will give you credit. Then what did India do next? It created a new set of startups. How many of you heard of startups like Zerodha, Grow, Upstock? These are all young startups which have become unicorns. Now these are Zerodha, Grow, Upstock. What did they do? They used digital identity and then they took stock market, wealth creation to tier 2, tier 3 cities and rural areas. So in India's rural areas, tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities, they took wealth creation stock market. 35% of India's stock market is controlled by young startups. Young startups like Zerodha, Grow, these are all boys in the age group of 28, 29, 30. They control 35% of our stock market. So they took it to tier 2, tier 3 cities. Then what did we do next? There was a new set of startups called Digit, Acco, etc. Digit, Acco, etc. who started giving insurance policy on the mobile. On the mobile, they give insurance policy. They give an insurance policy in 1 minute. When I was growing up, I took a LIC. It took me 6 months to get an insurance policy. They give insurance policy in 1 minute. Your car insurance, your life insurance in 1 minute. On the mobile, on the go. These are all young startups. So, what has India done? Identity. What did it do next? So, India is the only country in the place where bank accounts were created. 55% of the bank accounts came in India in 2015-17. But in all this, what India did, it created a public interest layer on top of which it allowed private sector to innovate and compete. So India is the only country where Google Pay is American, it competes with PhonePe, which is an Indian company. India is the only country where Paytm, which is an Indian company, competes with WhatsApp. They compete in the market space. In the market, the private sector competes. And why does it compete? Because the public identity is open source, it's open API, open source, open API, open standard, and it's interoperable. It's interoperable means that people are able to, many technologies are able to work around this, and you have constant innovation by the private sector. Innovation by the private sector is taking place. But layer has been created by the government. So we have created many layers. Identity, you will see Diksha. In education, you have Diksha, you have Swayam, you have DigiLocker, you have FASTags. All these are all open source. Open source on top of which innovation is taking place by the private sector. So what India has done is, India said that you cannot have big tech monopolizing. You cannot have Google monopolizing on citizens' data. Because future data will be your oil, and therefore big tech cannot control your data. India said that data must be consent based, and India said that in every transaction we will give a consent. It is a techno-economic consent which we give on the mobile. Otherwise the data must be owned by the citizens, not by big tech. And that is the difference of the model. And therefore we said the future of the world will be driven by digital public infrastructure, not by big tech. And get this into your head, because you are all Indians, you will all be doing disruption in technology, you will all be driving growth. And therefore the future of technological innovation will all be open source, it will be digital public infrastructure, it will not be big tech controlled, it will be driven by public layers on top of which private sector will innovate and grow. And that is what India has done. Now if India is able to find solutions like we have done in payment, what did we do during COVID? We gave 2.2 billion COVID vaccination. What did we do? 2.2 billion COVID vaccination. America struggled with it. What did we do during COVID? We gave money straight into the bank account of farmers. We gave money straight into account of women, 500 rupees. We were able to transfer money straight into the hands of the poor. America, Germany, Europe all struggled with it. In case of United States, 29 million cash transfers came back because they could not find the citizens. In India, this did not happen in a single case. We put money, went straight, there was no leakage. You know, when I was a young officer, we used to send money from Government of India to state government to districts, and a lot of money used to leak. There used to be leakage, corruption. Now we put money in 670 schemes of Government of India straight into the bank account. Straight into the bank account. Not a single paisa, there is a leakage. So technology has enabled India to become a more efficient economy. And technology is the only way for India to grow forward. If we are able to do technological disruption, if we are able to move forward technologically, and therefore in climate change also, like we have done in digital public infrastructure, if in climate change we are able to do technological disruption in solar energy, in green hydrogen, we will become a climate champion. We should become a climate champion so that we are able to spread electric vehicles, we are able to do battery storage, we are able to do green hydrogen. All these areas, we should become a global champion. That is the challenge for India. And therefore, we push for green development, we push for digital public infrastructure. When we started G20, like many of you, Europe and America had not heard about digital public infrastructure. For them, it was only Google and Facebook. For them, it was only Apple and Amazon. We made them aware of digital public infrastructure. We made them accept the definition of digital public infrastructure. We made them accept that the future of the world is digital public infrastructure and not a monopoly of data of the citizens by big tech. And therefore, the biggest victory, according to me, for India was the fact that they accepted that a developing country like India could do bigger technological transformation. I am making this point because in the history of the world, rarely does a technological innovation come from developing countries. In this case, it came from India, it was accepted by the world, we move forward. So digital public infrastructure became very, very important. And the last point for us, which was very important, was the Prime Minister's philosophy, which translated what was the theme of India's G20? Huh? What does it mean in English? Good. So that if you translate it in real term was the sixth priority, which was very important for us, was that we should have women-led development. Now when we said women-led development, the terminology which was being used so far in most United Nations was about gender equality. They were talking about gender equality, women equality, etc., but nobody had accepted the term women-led development. So when we brought in women-led development, it was opposed. Several countries opposed it. Saudi Arabia opposed it, China opposed it, many other countries opposed it. Women-led development was opposed, but we argued because for us, we said that it will not be possible for the world to grow till you are not able to ensure that 50% of the population is put into leadership position. If you do not put them in leadership position, we will not be able to have leaders who care for women, leaders who care for their education outcomes. Why do women lag behind? Because their nutritional standards are poor. A weak mother gives birth to a weak child. India has very high nutritional problems. It has very high stunting, it has very high wasting. Why does that happen? In most African countries, most developing countries, it happens because there is a weak mother. There is a vicious cycle of a weak mother giving birth to a weak child. So we focused on all these issues of nutrition, education, health for the women, and we said that the women must be put into leadership position, and it took us almost 1 year to be able to convince other countries that we should change the terminology to women-led development. And we made every country accept that philosophy of women-led development because we moved away from the United Nations terminology of gender equality and we made that. So, these were our priorities, but the other big challenge was what the Prime Minister wanted, and that was to ensure that we are able to speak the voice of the Global South. Now, speaking the voice of the Global South is very important from an Indian perspective. From an Indian perspective, it is very important for all of you to know that your position comes from the support you get from other nations. In the United Nations, the support you get in large numbers is from Global South. And if you do not support the Global South, you will not get the support. So, African Union wanted to be a permanent member of United Nations. Indonesia had failed them last year. And last year in Indonesia, the African Union President came to the Prime Minister and said that you don't fail us, and the Prime Minister assured him we'll take care of you. So one of the things we did was that we pushed for African Union to become a member of the G20. It was not easy, it was very difficult. Why was it difficult? It was difficult because Indonesia, China, many other countries, Australia, many of them wanted ASEAN to become a member. Now, Brazil and many other countries, they wanted their regional group, Latin American regional group to come in, etc. But we managed to ensure that we are able to get African Union as a permanent member of G20. So actually in reality what has happened, what did India do? It made G20 into a G21. G20 became a G21 with the inclusion of African Union as a permanent member. Now what is the opportunity for India? The opportunity for India is that in future, if you look at this year, 80% of the growth is coming from emerging markets. 80% of the global growth, according to IMF, is coming from emerging markets. It's not coming from developed world. What is happening in the world is that the developed world, America, Europe, is all aging. They are all aging. They are all getting into 70s, 80s, 90s when your productivity levels are low. What is happening in Africa and India? Young demographics. The population is young. What is the average age of India? 28. Even when we are 120, 47, our average age will be about 32, 33. So Africa and India is very young. And when you are young, your productivity levels are high, your dependency burdens are low, and therefore, according to the IMF, 2/3 of the global growth will come from emerging markets in the next 2 decades. And therefore, we said we'll speak the voice of the global south. So this document, New Delhi Leaders document, is actually uses the word emerging markets again and again, developing countries again and again. Again and again, the terminology used is developing countries and emerging markets because developing countries became the key voice. And therefore, for us, Global South became very important, member of African Union became very important, and we made sure that we are able to get African Union as G21, and that was India's big victory in G20. Now let me come to the last big challenge which India faced, and that was the challenge of bringing consensus to the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which has eluded all international forums and which has eluded United Nations, has not been able to arrive at a consensus. The only place where a consensus para could be arrived at was in India's G20. And for that, we had to, I was India's Sherpa. Sherpa's job is that he acts on behalf of his leader. Sherpa is supposed to take the leader on top of the Mount Everest. That means you have to take the leader on the peak of the Mount Everest. Every president has a Sherpa. Sherpas have to work to take the leaders on top of the Mount Everest. If you are not able to arrive at a consensus, that means you have failed as a Sherpa. If you take him on top of the Mount Everest, it means you have succeeded as a Sherpa. Now, the biggest challenge for all Sherpas was to be able to arrive at a consensus, have your national interest in mind, and yet arrive at a consensus on the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Now that means you have to bring the Russian Sherpa, you have to bring the Chinese Sherpa, you have to bring the US Sherpa, you have to bring the France, the Italy, the German, everyone together. So this was, and everybody had said that this is not possible, this will fail because this is impossible. So one thing we did was that we took, before the Leaders Summit was held, there's a Sherpa meeting for 6 or 7 days. So we took them all out of Delhi. We took them to Gurgaon in a place called Noo. How many of you have heard of Noo? So we took them to ITC Classic Hotel, which has a golf course. We put them there, and first thing we did was we didn't allow any mobile phones to come into during discussions. And we did not allow any mobile phones to come in because any draft declaration which would have got leaked out means that that para is dead. And we had New York Times, we had Washington Post, we had Financial Times, all wanting to know what is happening. Their correspondents were there. We did not allow any media entry into this place. So nobody else was allowed other than the Sherpa. And we had a meeting room with about 20 television screens on which the draft was being discussed again and again, again and again. So we started drafting this para. The first draft failed, the second draft failed, the third draft failed. And every time there were objections from either G7, the objections on G7 also came from Russia, some came from China, many other. So we went on doing this again and again, but the good thing for it is when you fail and you all get into international negotiation, the good thing is never take it as a failure. Come with a new draft, start discussion all over again. And second important thing is that issues are never settled within the negotiating room itself. You have to do a number of bilaterals. You have to discuss one-to-one, one-to-one, one-to-one. So I must have done about 250 bilaterals with all the Sherpas. 250 bilaterals, 300 hours of discussion, 16 hours of draft failure. Then leaders had started coming in on 8th. On the 8th, we floated the 16th draft. It failed. It failed by about 12 noon. America had reservations, G7 had reservations, Russia had its own challenge. Russia wanted a line against sanctions, which America did not want. There were several challenges. So then from Gurgaon, because the leaders had started coming, Sherpas had to go and brief the leaders. We shifted the discussion to Sushma Swaraj Bhavan in Chanakyapuri, and that was 9th September morning, 9 a.m. was the leaders' meeting. We at about 12 o'clock, we shifted it to Sushma Swaraj meeting. We started the meeting at 2 o'clock. We started discussing with Russia. For 4 hours, we discussed with Russia. Then we discussed one by one with G7 countries. And we knew, by that time we knew everybody's red line. Everyone's red line, what was the red line beyond which they will not go. And at about 11:30 in the night, that is 8th late night, 11:30 in the night, we came out with the last draft, which was the 17th draft. And 17th draft, I walked into that room and I said, this is the final draft. And the final draft was based on some very basic principles of United Nations, which was that we will respect territorial integrity, we will not resort to nuclear war, some very basic principles on which it was, and that we'll have food security, many other basic principles which of United Nations Charter, which we spelled out without condemning any nation, and we put that 17th draft, and I walked into the Sherpas meeting and I said, this is the final draft. This draft has been shown by me to my leader, who feels that it is a very balanced draft. But the important thing was that I worked with the Sherpas of Africa, Brazil, and Indonesia. 4 of us, it was a common draft. Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa, we were supported by Saudi, Argentina, Mexico, all the developing countries got together. And we presented a draft of developing countries together, and we said, this is the final draft. Either you take it or leave it. Take it or leave it. This is the final draft. We know everybody's red line. We've taken care of everybody. I said I've shown it to my Prime Minister, who feels it's a very balanced draft. The Brazilian President Sherpa said he's shown it to President Lula, who feels it's a very good draft. And the South African Sherpa said he's shown it to his president, who feels it's a very balanced draft. We said, take it or leave it. This is the final draft. And I said, I'll green it. And I said, if any leader has a problem, he can go and discuss it with my Prime Minister, but this will be the final draft. This is the final draft. You know, I had to be bold, I had to be gutsy, I had to be courageous, because if I'd gone on discussing, it would have not led us anywhere. This was a balanced draft, which was a final draft, and I said, take it or leave it. And I said, by 5 o'clock in the morning, I want a consensus. I want everybody to give their yes to it. I went back to my room. I said this and I went to my room, and the Russian Sherpa walked in, and their minister had also come in by that time, and they said that they want to include a line on sanctions imposed by United States. And that was a red line for United States. United States would never have accepted it. So between 2 in the night and 4:30 in the morning, we discussed with the Russian deputy minister, telling him that in case Russia does not accept this draft and insist on sanctions, we'll make it 19-1. And if you do not accept it, we said that we will get Zelensky, whom we had G7 wanted him to speak, and we said G7 insisted on him to speak, and he spoke in Indonesia virtually. And Prime Minister Modi had said that we will not allow Zelensky to speak so far. And we said if you do not agree, we will get Zelensky to speak after our Prime Minister's welcome address. He'll be the first person to address. And within 15 minutes of that, we got the consent of Russia. So we got the consent of Russia. By that time, we had the consent of Russia. And I told all of them that you give us your consent by 5 a.m. in the morning. And I went back. After finishing this at 4:30, I went to my house to have a bath. When I got up by 5 o'clock, I had the consent from France, Germany, Italy, all the G7 except US. I did not get the consent of US. I phoned up, from there I went to Bharat Mandapam, and Prime Minister was to come in by 8 a.m. So I went there. By that time I had not got the consent of the United States. So I phoned up the US Sherpa, and the US Sherpa told me that I've discussed it, I've just finished discussing it with President Biden. He's okay with the draft. We have no objection because it's a draft of the emerging markets. We cannot oppose all the emerging markets, but I have 2 challenges. One word needs to be changed here, and into the, and he said that please make sure that China and Russia's consent you have beforehand. Now, that word I looked at, and I did not have a problem in changing that word. Though it made a marginal difference, I didn't mind changing it because we had to get US on board. Russia's consent I had got at about 4:30 in the night. China I had not yet got. So I said, okay, let me try and see what I can do. And by that time, the Prime Minister came into the hall. He asked me, what is the status? And I had briefed him the previous night. He asked me, what is the status? I said, sir, there's a challenge, there's a problem. So he said, no, please, I'm not interested in the process. Give me a clear outcome. So will you get consensus or not? So I said, sir, I'll try my best. He said, not try your best, do get it. So that was all that I could say. Then after briefing the PM, I called up the Chinese Sherpa. The Chinese Sherpa said that we have no problem with the draft, but we have a problem. So I said, what is your problem now? So he said, this draft on this para of Russia, Ukraine, we have no problem, but there's a challenge, and that challenge is that my Prime Minister, who's leading their delegation, said that he said that there's a para on which China has agreed earlier in the main draft, which has been green, and that is that United States will hold the G20 in 2026. We do not agree with it, we want to withdraw with it. And we will withdraw with it, and you remove that para, and then we'll agree to this. So I said, why? He said, because the Americans do not issue us visas, and they do not issue visas for people from Hong Kong, they do not issue visa to the Hong Kong governor, and so on. So that was a bilateral issue which they were trying to sort out at the multilateral level. So from 9:30, the leaders' meeting started at 9. From 9:30 to 11:30 in the side room, I sat with the American Sherpa and the Chinese Sherpa trying to sort this out. The Chinese said we want a written guarantee from the United States that they will give us visas in future for all the people from Hong Kong and to the governor. So for 2 hours we sat, and finally I convinced the United Nations that instead of guarantee, I told the Chinese that guarantee is a weak word, you better write ensure. So instead of guarantee, we said ensure, and the United States gave that letter at about 12 o'clock, and by 1 o'clock we had the agreement ready. That's how we clinched it. So bilateral issue was clear. And so we got that, we clinched it, and by 1 o'clock on the same day, the Prime Minister announced that we had achieved we have achieved full consensus on all the 83 paras, and that's how these were very, very tough negotiations on the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which is not a crisis of our making, which is not a crisis of our doing, but as a leader of G20, we were able to bring G7, we were able to bring all developing countries, we were able to bring Russia, China, all of them together on 83 paras, almost 216 outcomes, and bring consensus on all of them and demonstrate India's great ability to straddle all the world of different worlds on different complex issues and arrive at consensus. So these were very interesting times, but India demonstrated its leadership. Much of this I could do because I could be bold, I could be aggressive, I could be gutsy, I could be courageous, because I had this, I was the Sherpa, but I was doing it on behalf of a leader whose stature and standing in international relations was high. And because my leader gave me full support, I could change many of these issues. So that is the story of India's people. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for such an informative session, sir. The House is now open for questions.
All right. I think you've heard a brilliant exposition of how things happened and how tough it was. So all of you who are MUN indoctrinated would have realized the real world is far, far more tougher, and you heard it from India's leading practitioner as to how G20 came about successfully in the end for India. We have a Delhi declaration, and as I said, there are going to be consequences of this. The impact of it will be felt for many years, and you people, as he said, those who are using public infrastructure or private enterprise successfully are going to come out of some of you guys. So now, I think the logistic problem on our side, I think we positioned the podium on this side. So many of you on this side must have felt slightly neglected. So I'll take a question from here first. Anyone? Please raise your hand. We'll ask you to speak. Take a mic. Introduce yourself to sir and then speak. Yeah, I see one lady here. Please.
A very good morning, sir. My name is Amitabh, and we talked about digital India.
School. I know your school. I can see your uniform. But tell sir.
We are from Rajmata Krishna Kumari Girls Public School, Jodhpur. So my question is that we are successing in digital India, but we are now facing a new threat of cybersecurity. So what are we looking forward to countermeasures for that? Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah. Could you give her name again, please, ma'am? Yeah, just shout, I can hear you.
Unnati Shekhawat.
Unnati Shekhawat. Okay, anybody else on this side of the flank? Yeah. Who's that, Siddharth?
Good morning, sir. My name is Kanish Goel and I am from the Punjab Public School, Nabha. Sir, so I have two major questions. The first question is, was the Israel-Palestine issue brought up during the G20? And sir, my second question is, sir, civil servants are considered the cream class of the society. And you are at the very top of the civil servants themselves, being the president of Niti Aayog and the Sherpa of India. So sir, my question is, what does it take to be the best of the very best in the country? Thank you, sir.
I'll take another question from here before sir answers the first lot of questions. Yes, sir. Yeah, here. You're from Modern? Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, I can hear you. You just announce your name, we can hear you. Hello? Time zone. Time zone.
Hello. Yeah. Good morning, sir. My name is Tanmay Shigotra. I'm from Modern School, Barakhamba Road. My question to you, sir, is I was rather surprised that during this research, I found out that we have not achieved consensus in even the General Assembly on issues such as the definition of even terrorism. Do you think in the future the G20 can take up legal issues from the General Assembly and work upon them for consensus in at least the developed and the economically developed nations on such issues? Thank you, sir.
Okay, we'll hold the next block of questions. I'll request Sir to respond to these, and then we'll take up some more questions.
So let me start with the last question first. And that's simply because I'm also from modern school, so I think I should do a little bit of favoritism. It'll be very difficult to arrive at consensus in United Nations because it's become a very unwieldy body, and there's a conflict in the Security Council itself unless and until there's a change in structure of the United Nations itself. It's an outdated body, according to me, and it'll be very difficult to drive global consensus making in G20, in United Nations. And therefore, what is happening is that much of the role of United Nations is now being taken by G20. And G20 is driving the agenda forward because all the major key countries get represented here in G20. They are represented by all G7, by developing countries, now by African Union will also get represented. But Russia and China, everybody is represented here. So all major key reforms, including political issues. Now G20 started off as an economic body. It grew from the finance minister and the central bank governor's body, but it has become now a leaders-driven body. So G20 is far more important. So issues like terrorism and all, etc., artificial intelligence, many of these things now get discussed at leaders level. So G20, according to me, is far more powerful, far more critical to the world than United Nations. United Nations is just a top shop now. So this is important to understand. Second is about civil servants and to be the best of the best. One is that civil servants, to my mind, need to, you work in the state, you work in the center, but there are some key qualities, and one key quality is that you need to be not a status quoist. You have to be an agent of change all the time. You have to constantly change. Secondly, you have to be a visionary. Most civil servants get caught up in file work, day-to-day work. You have to think ahead of your time. What is the impact you want to leave behind when you leave that particular job. You should have left a huge imprint on every single job, and that means you need to think about 15 to 20 years ahead. Most Indians don't think ahead, they just get caught in their day-to-day functioning. So you need to leave an institution a 10x better than what you've taken it up. So I think a visionary approach is very important. Third is your great ability to be a team leader, to be able to motivate and take your team along. And that is very, very important. Take your team along. That is critical. And fourthly, to my mind, what I feel is that you should be able to, whichever job you do, you have your constituency in a district as a district collector. The people of that district are your constituency, and you should be able to make a difference to their life. And as SDM, you should be able to go to the grassroots, see that whatever you're working on, if you're working on education, see that education outcomes are improved. If you're working on health, make a radical difference to that area and to that subject, which is very, very important. And in all these areas, let me tell you, India is such a populous country, a huge transformation is required. And lastly, I would only say that always use technology to leapfrog. Technology will be the key driver, it will be the differentiator between the good and the very best. And that is really the key to everything. And On the Israel-Palestine issue, I would merely say that Israel-Palestine issue came came a little after. We were lucky that it hadn't broken out. It came a little. So India was also at divine intervention in the sense that the Israel-Palestine issue, if it had broken out during our time, would have been very difficult to stitch it together. And it came up about a month after. So Israel-Palestine issue was not discussed. And lastly, this excellent question by Unnati Shekhawat on cybersecurity, which is very important. So a number of our agencies from from Home Ministry to Ministry of Information Technology to several cells constantly, to NSA's office constantly keep track of cybersecurity issues. You have to be always abreast on this. During the G20 itself, there were millions of attacks on our website. Nobody could penetrate it. And cybersecurity will be a huge challenge in the coming years. And technologically, you'll have to be ahead of time. This is going to be really the key to whatever we do technologically. This will be really, it's a very important issue and a very important question. And I think only thing is that you'll have to have, technologically, you'll have to mash that and be abreast of the attempts being made to thwart your progress. So a number of our agencies constantly keep working on this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We'll now take up the next block of questions. But Unnati, just for your further reading, this year there was a global initiative on the cyber security issues, and India has the lead in it. After the G20, there was a big event in Delhi on this, and India has the lead. So if you read up more, you'll get more information on that. Okay, can I take up some more questions? Okay, Modern, you had your turn. The ones in the green blazers, anyone? Okay, just below you, MCTS. Yeah, the one, yeah, come. The one, yeah, the one sitting next to Mr. Rajbamshi, yeah.
So, use of technology also comes...
No, so you have a name, and you belong to a school.
Yes, sir. My name is Tarpanashi, I belong from Mayo College Girls School.
So, slowly, he wants to write your name. He's very happy to know the people who are asking questions.
Tarpanashi.
What does the name mean, he's asking?
It means that the God resides inside me.
You have a competition from Ramlalla now. Please go ahead.
So my question to you is, advancement in technology also comes with safe use of technology. So we have seen that North Korea has been gradually using nuclear weapon. So was that addressed in the G20 summit that was recently held in Delhi?
Okay, next question. All right, is that Vellum in front? Yeah, please. Pass a mic to the Vellum delegation. Oh, anybody at the back there? The tracksuit crowd? No? This side? Yeah, who's that? Anjali? Yeah, okay. After this. After the girl from Vellum.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for that wonderful speech.
No name?
I'm Vanshi Agrawal from Vellum Girls School, Dehradun. And my question to you is, on international platforms such as these, how does one learn to balance the act of compromise and also achieve meaningful action with respect to achieving consensus?
Yeah. Yeah, Anjali, your question. Yeah, later or now? Cancel. I don't have a mic right now. Come, somebody run up with a mic, please. Okay, meanwhile, anybody else here who's closer to a mic? Yes, the girl in the blazer there. Yeah, you take the question first, come.
Good morning, sir. I'm Aksha Mittal from Yadvindra Public School, Patiala. First of all, we are really honored that we heard about G20 from you. My question to you is that in some Muslim countries, the Islamist groups like ISIS and Jemaah Islamiyah are currently active. And I read in the declaration they were like not being mentioned. So, like, they were discussed in the G20 summit?
Yes. Yeah. Pass the mic up. Meanwhile, okay, just I'll come to you. Yeah, hang on. Get a mic near you first.
So should I go ahead? Good morning, sir. So my name is Anjali Pankaj Narayan and I'm a faculty of economics at Mayo College. Firstly, thank you so much for giving us such a clear perspective and insight into the working of the G20. So I have two questions. One, that the way G20 was conducted in our country during the presidency, when we traveled across, we saw its presence in so many cities. It was really impressive. So one, that is it like all countries do it this way when they get the presidency? And second, what does it mean for having hosted such a successful presidency? What does it mean for India's being perceived? How serious is India being perceived now after this? And also, what does it mean in terms of India getting a permanent seat at the United Nations? So what are the implications? Thank you.
Okay, one last one in this block of questions. All right, come.
Good morning, sir. I'm Devraj Singh Rathore of Mayo College, grade 11th. My question to you is, as you served in the civil services, how did that factor help you in becoming a good Sherpa?
Okay. Yeah, Devraj. Okay. All right. Hold your questions now. Let's answer some of these and we'll get back to more people.
So let me start with Anjali's question, because she's the teacher, but she's asked question more like a diplomat than a teacher. And her question is that India did its G20 very, very differently than other countries, because normally G20 is held in one city, capital city, or two cities. Brazil, for instance, is doing it in Brasilia and in Rio. It's not taking it to many places. But the Prime Minister was very clear that he wanted this G20 not to be an elitist body. He wanted it to be a people's presidency. He said, don't do it in Delhi. If you do it only in Delhi, all the meetings, it will remain elitist. Take it to all the states of India. So he held a meeting of all the chief ministers and governors, and he himself, he made me do a presentation on the importance of G20, but he asked all of them to own the G20, and therefore we took it to every state of India, every union territory of India, and it became a people's movement. We took it to schools, we took it to colleges, we took it to universities, we made it into a Jan Bhagidari. And what we did was we used this opportunity to improve, like we did it in the first Sherpa meeting we did in Udaipur. And we used this opportunity to improve drainage, sewage, solid waste, road, including the lake transformation. All that we did. Kerala backwaters had not been cleaned up for years. We cleaned it up. So, we used this opportunity to improve the city infrastructure. So 60 cities, and when you look at it, we took them to many other places. Like when we went to Udaipur, we also took them to Kumbhalgarh. So Kumbhalgarh fort had not been lit up for a decade. The lighting was done. It was cleaned up, archaeological sites were cleaned up. So we used G20 as an opportunity to improve India's infrastructure in a very, very big way. And that was critical. India's presidency was very, very different from other countries. And I think to my mind, it has greatly raised India's standing in the Committee of Nations. It has brought eminence to G20. And when I went to Brazil, let me tell you, everybody was complimenting India for the way it had done its G20 presidency. We used millets in every meal, so that was also the year of millets, 2023. So we promoted millets. We used local culture. Every state used its local culture. We did not impose culture from Delhi. We used one district, one product. So local handicrafts, artisans, all of them benefited. So India's standing really went up on the manner in which it did it, the manner in which it did the leaders' conference, the manner in which it brought consensus. All that was key. India's standing as a leader in the global, I think to my mind, it's one of India's greatest diplomatic victories. And according to Mr. Jaishankar, who's our External Affairs Minister, who of course played a very key role. According to him, this is India's greatest diplomatic victory since its independence. So, I mean, G20 that way has really raised India's stature, to my mind. The other question was from Divyaraj on how my other postings have helped me. Well, you know, when you join as a civil servant, you grow and evolve over a period of time. But, you know, G20, one thing it teaches you is that you must have a multidisciplinary perspective. And all of you, whether you are a physics student, whether you are a chemist, whether you are a business administrator, whether you are an MBA, whether you are an economist, whatever you are, first of all, learn to have a multidisciplinary perspective. Every sector has many dimensions. Look at them from a multidimensional perspective. Every climate change has so many impacts. Geopolitics has so many impacts. So learn to think multidisciplinary. Third is learn to think. You know, important thing is that Indian education system is all about passing exams and mugging and all that. You know, the objective of an education system is to make you think. So everything, every word that I've uttered here has some meaning or the other. And my suggestion to all of you is please go back, read the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration and try and understand that for every letter, every word, we've had to bring consensus from 20 G20 countries, 9 invitee countries, and all the multilateral forums. That is IMF, World Bank, ADB, all of them we brought together. So 43 institutions agreed on that New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. Please access it on the net. Read it, debate it, discuss it. Every word is critical on that. And to my mind, my job, my posting as CEO Niti Aayog, where I dealt with a range of issues, really helped me, to give me a multi-sectoral dimension to be able to handle many of these subjects. But I had a very good team. I had some very good foreign service officers who assisted and supported me during this. But, you know, this ability to finally negotiate, the final ability to be tough, the crunch line, the final ability to clinch it comes out of your personality. And that personality is shaped by your school. And therefore, during your school, while you are here, what you do on the sporting field, what you do on the extracurriculars, all that, the kind of friends you make, all that is very, very important. You know, my personality has been shaped by the cricket I played, by the squash I played, by the, by the photography or the carpentry that I did in my school. And therefore, your personality and how you grow and shape is born not out of merely your education, but out of sports and extracurricular activities that shape you. And therefore, it's very important that you must excel in one sport, you must excel in one extracurriculars. That must remain with you throughout your life. And that will help you to become a great negotiator later in life. This question on how did we bring consensus by having nerves of steel. you have to have nerves of steel. Without that, you can't do it. You have to practice a lot of brinkmanship. Without brinkmanship, you can't do it. And terrorism, many other things were discussed. They form a part of the declaration. And, ISIS in particular was briefly mentioned, but it is not part of it. Many of you have talked about geopolitical issues and how did we manage it, etc. So let me just tell you that that particular para was called, that geopolitical para, we didn't term it as Russia-Ukraine crisis, we termed it for the planet, people, peace and prosperity. That's how we titled it. And it very clearly said that all states must act in a manner consistent with the purposes and principles of UN Charter in its entirety. All states must refrain from the threat or use of force to seek territorial acquisition against the territorial integrity and sovereignty or political independence of any state. And it also said that the use of threat or use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible. So, and it also ended up with the PM's call that today's era is, we also finally said that we support peace in Ukraine in the spirit of one earth, one family, one future, and today's era must not be a war. So that's what.
Okay, I'll take one last block of questions. All these young boys here, anybody going to have a question or not? Okay, think about it till I come back to you. Okay, who's ready? There was someone here.
Good morning,
ready.
sir.
Yeah, who's got a mic? Where are you? Yes, ma'am. Please give
My name is Ishmeet Kaur Mack and I'm from the Emerald High International School, Indore. So my question is, as 1/3 of the world...
Go slow, let him just get... First, most important, before your question, he wants to note your name.
Ishmeet Kaur Mack.
Not the question, is who's asking this is so important? Ishmeet Kaur.
May I start? As 1/3 of the world is in recession and countries are facing with debt crisis, also it is seen that there is rise in the debt to GDP ratio of the developed countries. Often IMF and World Bank are biased to give loans to the developed countries. So what are the notable steps of the G20 to provide economic support and easy loan policies towards the underdeveloped and developing countries?
Sir, could I ask a question?
Where is this?
Sir, here.
Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Hi, sir, I'm Kavya Sinha. I'm from Dhirubhai Ambani International School in Mumbai. So, first of all, I just like to say you made us feel so proud to be Indian. You know, all the powerful work you've done. It's an honor being here today. So, we have two questions. The first one is, we were curious to know, how does India view on considering or looking into nuclear fuel as an alternative fuel source to achieve the net zero goal? How does India view on considering or looking into nuclear fuel as an alternative fuel source to achieve the net zero goal? We also had another question. How do you think the expansion, especially the inclusion of the African Union and the development of G20, will change the geopolitical mechanisms of the world?
Hello, sir. Sir, in the middle.
Stand up here.
Sir, on top.
See on top, yeah, not on car. Yeah, come on.
A very good morning, sir. I'm Viraj from Mayo College. And my question to you is, as India hosted the G20, there were applauds about the beautification of India. But on the other hand, there were questions raised about, was it beautification or slum eradication? And so and the other question is, the buildings which were made for G20, what is government's vision for using it for any other purpose?
Good morning, sir. Same. Sir, top. Same place, sir. So my name is Kanish Kapoor. I'm from Mayo College, grade 10th. So my question is, despite India's efforts in the multilateral world, what are your thoughts on India's passport ranking 80th in the world today?
Good morning, sir. My name is Aryan Bhagat. I am from Sandhya School, Gwalior. And my question is that India has not been in good terms with their neighboring countries in the Southeast Asian countries. So, what is your stand on that?
Namaste, sir.
Last one for this block before. Okay.
Sir, here.
Okay. Ganesh, you just repeat your question for sir. Oh, yell from there, I can hear you.
My question is that what are your thoughts on India's passport ranking 80th in the world, despite of our multilateral efforts?
Sir,
Yeah.
here.
Some lady, I can hear
Sir.
a girl's voice. Yes, girl, please come.
Yes, sir. Namaste, sir. Thank you for your wonderful speech. It was very enlightening. I am Twishi Mathur from Mayur School, Ajmer, and my question to you is, seeing that the G20 is taking the torch from the United Nations and its enhanced capacity for agreement, so despite these agreements, sir, how is this agreements, especially regarding geopolitical crisis and conflict resolution, how much of this is getting translated onto the grassroots level, and how is this mechanism enhanced towards conflict resolution on the grassroots level, especially in terms of like wars like Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Palestine?
Okay, hold your horses now. Allow sir to answer this question. But after he answers this block of questions, I've been looking around, and I was in the army and we wear all our decorations and medals and all. I see the most highly medallion clad young girl in front. So you please stand up, ask your question, and next question we'll take later. What's your name, beta?
Tanishka. Jai Hind, sir. I am Tanishka from Sunbeam School, Leher, Tara, Varanasi. So my question is, I am Tanishka from Sunbeam School, Leher, Tara. Jai Hind, sir. My question is, how does India plan to engage with non-G20 country to ensure more comprehensive global approach?
To ensure what?
More comprehensive global approach.
No, that's it. I'll have to back. Should I start? So let me start with Viraj's question about beautification and slum eradication, etc. So whatever you do in India, whether you do beautification or you do slum eradication, there will always be a counter view. There will always be criticism. So my view on that is that as long as you are clear about what you want to do, achieve beautification, or you want to do slum eradication and resettle slum somewhere else, there will be a counter view, there will be some criticism or the other. You should take it in your stride as long as you are clear that what you are doing is right. So don't worry too much about what we've attempted to do is what was good for the country as a whole. If you're doing roads, if you're creating good infrastructure, if you're beautifying, that was all meant for the country. That was meant to give a good facelift for the country. It should be a continuous effort as Delhi is doing. It should not be a one-time effort for the sake of G20, but it should be a continuous effort. Like Mayo College maintains itself with beautiful flowers all the year round, or we should have it year round everywhere, irrespective of G20. And good urban management is also an art which we should learn. So don't worry too much about it, some criticism or the other. The other is about nothing was actually created for G20. Bharat Mandapam was not created for G20. It was being created at ITPO. In any case, it was expedited. It's a permanent venue for holding several meetings. There's another Yashabhumi which has been created, which has not been created for G20, but it has been created as a center for meetings, incentives, conventions, exhibitions. These should be, this is a very big market globally. It's a $200 billion market globally, which we should capture by holding international conventions and meetings and exhibitions in India. And that's a very big opportunity for us to drive. Second, on this question of Kavya Sinha from Dhirubhai Ambani on nuclear fuel for net zero. So, nuclear energy is important. Nuclear energy is important because of base load. And nuclear energy is now, the world is moving towards small modular reactors which can be put in several places. So small modular reactors came in for discussions, and small modular nuclear reactors will be the future. They will play a very critical role in achieving net zero. So that's important. And they'll be net zero cannot be achieved only with renewable energy. You will need base load, and base load will come from nuclear energy. On Viraj, then Kanesh Kapoor asked me about passport ranking. So, in some of these indicators, India used to do badly. India has shown that in ease of doing business, how it's possible to improve India's position. We've improved radically India's position in several of these areas, especially on digitization, ease of doing business, many other things. The important thing is that you should keep competing and improving on these rankings. And I think over a period of time, our passport handling has improved very much. And I'm quite sure that over a period of time, with hard work, we'll improve the passport ranking also. There's no doubt in my mind that it can be done. And somebody asked me about, Ishmit Kaur asked me about debt to GDP, IMF and the World Bank. So important thing is that when we talk about this Multilateral Development Bank, there was a committee constituted by India which comprised of Larry Summers of Harvard and N.K. Singh of India. They made very clear recommendations on how multilateral development institutions will mobilize. The World Bank today utilizes only 0.6 cents to a dollar from private sector. And they should be doing actually 5x of that. So how they will raise more resources from the private sector will be the key to that. And there's a huge focus on that. And then Tanishka asked me about net zero, non-G20 countries and global approach. So we had about 9 other countries. India involved 9 other countries during its G20 presidency. Our New Delhi leaders' declaration has by and large been applauded by all countries. By African unions, you get another 55 countries in it. So all of them have appreciated what India has done, and I think we'll continue to work with other countries. They'll all work with us on that. And Krishi Mathur's question about reality at grassroots level, that's what we are all pushing for. A lot of things have got translated on ground. There are some complex geopolitical issues. They take a little time. But once countries take a position, means they have taken a global position on this. And that becomes their position. G20 is a document which is accepted at the leaders' level. That means it's an accepted position by that country for future negotiation also. That becomes the stated position of that country. And therefore, it is accepted at the highest level, the leaders' level. And I'm sure that over a period of time we'll be able to implement many of these key issues. And that is why you involve IMS, World Bank, ADB, because then we drive change through these agencies. And somebody here, I didn't get the full name, AV asked me about geopolitical equation. Who asked me that question? Yeah, you asked me that was your second question. What was it? Yeah. It will greatly change geopolitics because African Union, that means 55 countries of Africa, will play a very critical role in global decision making. That is India's big contribution to G20. Africa will now play a very key and critical role in G20.
Okay, the last time, now what we're going to do is questions are closed from your college. Huh? I said questions are closed from Mayo College? Mayo College Girls' School.
Sir, hi, here.
Hi. Hey.
Hello, right here.
Yeah, wait. Just wait. Hi. Just wait. Hi. Wait. Okay. Listen. Questions are closed from Mayo. And, huh? Yeah, तेरे को chance दूंगा. That's why I'm saying. खड़े रहे. So, why I'm saying is, we are the hosts, we must allow with just a couple of questions left, we have badly overshot the time. I won't say badly, very gainfully we overshot the time. I'm happy about it, but unfortunately, Mr. Kant has other commitments and he needs to go back and take his flight, so I have to be conscious of that. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm going to just take 3 questions. I see Mayurite standing, I will take your question. Okay? After which, we will go into women-led development, and I will allow 3 more questions to be asked only by the girls or ladies. All right? So let the poorer gender ask the question first, and then we come to the. Yeah. Okay, Mayur.
Good morning, sir. This is Dipanshu Samata from Mayur School, Noida. And my question is a bit of a long one, so please bear with me.
No. Less than, it has to be less than 83 paragraphs, please.
No, sir, not at all. It will be at max 5 lines.
No, questions must be short. Short and crisp. You must learn the art of asking short and crisp.
Very well, sir. I'll make it crisp and concise for you. So, my question here is that based on the success which you have achieved in the G20 and the multilateral summits which you have been having in recent years, in the future, can we expect to see this inclusion of other multilateral organizations? You had mentioned ASEAN, so ASEAN or Arab League, something like that. Also, can India emerge as a peacemaker in such conflicts which you are seeing? For example, in a while ago, Qatar emerged as the peacemaker in the Gaza-Palestine conflicts. So can India also have a role in doing that? That's all. Thank you.
This lady is human now.
Yeah. Hi, good morning, sir. It was lovely to hear you speak about this. So my question was, you, I think, briefly mentioned
Your name.
Oh, right. Sorry. I'm Riya Chawla. I'm from Dhirubhai Ambani International School.
Riya Chawla.
Yes. And my question was, I think you briefly mentioned this in your keynote address, but how does India's brain drain affect its capabilities to contribute effectively in areas such as innovation and technology? And how can this concern be addressed in the context of a G20 conference? Thank you.
Okay, one of the, I told you, your women-led development. I got this. Your buddy is next to you. Yeah, give her a chance.
Good morning, sir. I am Nikita Mittal from Modern School, Barakhamba Road.
Name again?
Nikita Mittal. Alright, so even though G20 is a entirely consensus-based organization, it's not binding. So the agreements, it's up to the member states if they do want to implement or not implement the agreements agreed upon. So how is this problem, do you think, can be solved during the future G20 meetings as it evolves?
Sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, sir. This is Shruti Chaturvedi from Sandhya Kanya Vidyalaya, Gwalior. And my question is that as G20 is a platform where financial aids and social political issues are discussed, how do the member nations talk about the job security among the nations, of the developing nations and the developed nations? Because in every nation we can see migrations, terrorism around. So how do we come up with the job security as a consensus approach? Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Myself, Vanya Agarwal from Mayur School, Noida. So my question is that economic conditions of various regions and the people there also play a major role in them partaking in terrorism. So what I want to ask is that do you think that in the coming years will this problem, these economic conditions, affect terrorism than it already does? And can this change the way we view and see terrorism? Thank you.
The green blazer, any one of you, one of the please. Only one. Yeah, pass the mic. After that, girl from Vellum, after this, and then last question. Yeah.
Sir, my name is Varanya Arya and I'm from DLF Public School, Uttar Pradesh. So my question is that the veto power has been criticized for its controversial nature. Then why are countries like Germany and India, they're very insisted on having the veto power? And can we not go for a complete dissolution of veto power?
Vellum.
Good morning, sirs. I'm Anukriti from Vellum Girls School. So my question is, India...
What's your name?
Anukriti. So India has always abstained in motions regarding the Russia-Ukraine war or the Israel-Palestine war. So how does India hope to be a major peacemaker if we choose to abstain in such major issues?
Okay, that be all. Thank you so much everyone for asking your questions. I know there are many more, but please bear with the constraints of time. We'll allow sir to answer the last block of questions.
So, a large number of questions have been asked, and let me, some of them have related to terrorism, and I just wanted to say that on terrorism, the issue was discussed, and there was clearly a para which says that all G20 countries will deny terrorist groups. I think this was asked by Vanya, and somebody else had also asked it. What the para said was that we'll deny terrorist groups safe haven, freedom of operations, financial, material or political support. So fully there was a para on that. This is important. This was important in terms of spelling out a clear message from the leaders. G20 is important because this is the only forum where all the top leaders meet. So, one is about the declaration, which is very important, but it's also about leaders meeting, interacting, their body language, knowing each other, handling each other personally. That's also very, very important. And then there was a question about Riya Chawla asking me about brain drain, innovation and all that. Let me tell you that always people will go out from any country to other countries in the world. Don't worry too much about brain drain. Important thing is that for India to grow at high rates. If India grows at high rates of 9 to 10% per annum for 3 decades or more, all these people will come back to India. It's not about people going out. You have 4 billion people out, people will come in. But if it grows and if it is able to create top-class companies, if it creates an innovative culture within India, you will have a lot of people finding jobs here, doing innovation here, R&D here. When India grows at high rates, I've seen a number of people wanting to come back from abroad to India and work here. So don't worry about brain drain. What we should worry about is making India grow at high rates, so there's a reverse brain drain. People from all over the world come here to do jobs, and they create an innovative. That's more important. And Nikita Mittal asked me about G20 consensus. Where's Nikita? Where is she? She asked me about consensus making, and how does you asked me that how does it take place, consensus with?
So even though it's consensus based, it's not binding.
No. So when consensus is arrived at, it may not be binding, but in international politics, once that position is taken by a country, that becomes your stated position. You can't back out of it. Like Saudi Arabia, if it accepts that it will do tripling of renewable energy, it will do tripling of renewable energy. Then it can't change that position on a later date. And that's why international positions of this nature are very important, particularly G20. Because these are accepted by their leaders. Once it's accepted at the leaders level, no country can back out of it. That's important. And that is why countries then live up to what their leaders have said. That becomes the country's position. And Vanya asked me about veto power. Who asked me about veto power? Varanya asked me about veto power. See, important thing is that what India is saying is that the United Nations Security Council needs to be restructured. Look at what has happened since United Nations was constituted. Since United Nations was constituted, there has been a global shift of power. The share of GDP of Europe has come down from 30% to 15% in the global GDP. India's has gone up. Germany has gone up. So these countries do not have a say in geopolitics. Whether it's veto power or no veto power, there's a question of the Security Council being reconfigured. The way the United Nations has been formulated, that needs to be redone. There is not just about veto power, it's the reconfiguration of the United Nations, which is what India is fighting for, and that is what is important. And to the question, what India has argued for is that restructure the United Nations itself. It's not about just the veto power, it's about restructuring the United Nations. And Shruti Chaturvedi's question about jobs and job security, skills, jobs, all were discussed during G20. They are all important issues to allow for international migration based on skills, and that's why skilling is very important. By 2047, 30% of the skilled manpower across the world, and it's important to understand this, 30% of the skilled jobs in the world will be occupied by Indians. And that is why it's very important to skill Indians. If Indians are skilled in new technologies, and new technologies, I'm talking about machine learning, artificial intelligence, prompt engineers, product development, designing, all these are new branches of information technology. We are not getting enough product developers, we are not getting any machine learners. If we are able to, startups are suffering because of that. If we are able to change the curriculum in our triple IITs, engineering institutions, we'll actually throw up a lot of what the world requires in the future. And therefore, there's a need to change curriculum. In fact, there's a need to change curriculum from the school level itself to create jobs, skilled manpower for the world, what the world needs. You know, earlier for hospitality, for hotels, all general managers of all the top hotels used to come from the Swiss hospitality institutes. In future, they'll all come from India. So we need to redesign ourselves for those courses, and that's important to my mind. And somebody asked me, Dipanshu asked me about Asia Arab League and being a peacemaker. So, you should get into this business of peacemaking only when you are absolutely sure that you will achieve success. You can't get into the job of peacemaking like Turkey did and failed. You can get in if both the sides have your confidence, if both the sides, you do informal third-party negotiations always, but you should formally do it only if you are able to achieve success. If you have the confidence you can't afford to have a failure. And that would mean that Ukraine should listen to you, Russia should listen to you. I don't think we are in a position where Ukraine will listen to us because the entire financing, support of weapons is all being done by the United States and Europe. So we have to be absolutely clear to get into areas where you achieve success. Don't get into areas where you achieve failure. So you should know your strength, you should know your weaknesses. So I think with that we've have I answered everybody's question? Have I answered Anukriti's question on Russia, Ukraine? No. So, what did you ask me? Russia, Ukraine, we keep abstaining in United Nations. Yeah, because, see, we abstain in United Nations because you must understand that there's a history to India's relationship. We live in a very troubled neighborhood. You have Pakistan against us, you have Afghanistan is war-torn, there's terrorism there, you have a crisis with China. You can't afford to make Russia also an enemy. And secondly, we've been buying oil from Russia. Because we've been buying oil from Russia, we've been able to provide gas to our citizens at very low prices. We've been able to actually process refine a lot of that oil and sell to Europe and keep the oil prices down globally because of that. We can't afford to have a situation where we alienate everyone around us. So we are in a troubled neighborhood. We have to manage our relations very cleverly. We have managed our diplomacy as been at its best. We've been able to manage United Nations, Europe and Russia as well. And I think that is what good diplomacy is all about. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, sir. And now we will, as we get into the closing formalities, I think to reflect the sentiments of all my friends here, may I request all of you kindly rise and show our appreciation for Mr. Amitabh Kant.
Thank you, sir. May I now request the director to present a token of our appreciation and gratitude to Mr. Amitabh Kant. Thank you, sir. On behalf of the Mayo staff and students, I take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our keynote speaker, Mr. Amitabh Kant, for taking out time from his busy schedule and for making this day momentous. We are equally thankful to the heads of various schools for sending their student delegations. We are grateful to our special invitees and guests who have spared their time to be amidst us this morning. With this, we come to the end of this program. May I request the participating teams and the teacher escorts to please stay back for a conference photograph with Mr. Kant. Thank you and have a great day.